Chapter 1, the fear of judgment from others. You ever feel like you're constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering what people think of you? Like, what are they saying behind your back? Are they judging you for what you're wearing, how you speak, what you do? Man, it's exhausting, right? It's like we've got this inner voice that just won't quit, always reminding us, hey, what's everyone else going to say? In Buddhism, we talk a lot about attachment, and one of the biggest attachments we all carry is the attachment to other people's opinions. It's funny though. Think about it. People are caught up in their own stuff most of the time, yet here we are, bending over backwards, stressing out because we're worried about being judged. It's like trying to control the wind. Pointless. This fear, it's rooted in ego. Yeah, that little voice in your head that wants to be liked, admired, and never criticized. Buddhism teaches that the more we cling to this, the more we suffer. Imagine a crab in a bucket. Ever heard of the crab bucket concept? It's wild. You've got one crab trying to climb out, but the others keep pulling it back down. That's how social pressure works. We're often stuck in this crab bucket of society, too scared to stand out, to climb higher because we fear the judgment of others pulling us back down. Now, let me be real with you for a sec. I've been there. I used to feel like I wasn't ready for anything. I'd second guess myself all the time, thinking, what if they think I'm stupid? What if they laugh at me? It's paralyzing. But here's the thing. Those thoughts, they're just thoughts. Impermanent. The Buddha teaches that everything is temporary, even your fears. That judgment you fear so much, it's fleeting, just like the wind. Here one moment, gone the next. But why do we care so much? Because deep down we want connection. We want to belong. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we mistake conformity for belonging. We think, if I just fit in, no one will judge me. But, spoiler alert, people judge no matter what. So why not just be yourself? Authenticity in Buddhism is about embracing your own nature without clinging to the idea of how others should see you. When we start to let go of this attachment to judgment, we begin to feel lighter, more free. It doesn't mean the fear vanishes overnight. It's a practice, a journey. We have to keep showing up, being mindful of when that fear creeps in and gently reminding ourselves, this is not who I am. So, next time you feel that fear bubbling up, remember the teachings. Remember that other people's opinions are like clouds. They pass. But your true self, your essence, is like the sky. Always there, unchanging. When you stop worrying about the clouds, you realize how vast and beautiful the sky really is. And trust me, the freedom you feel when you stop caring about judgment, that's real peace. That's nirvana. Chapter 2, Imposter Syndrome and Perfectionism. All right, let's talk about something I know you've probably felt at least once in your life. Imposter syndrome. You know that sneaky little voice in your head that whispers, you're not good enough. Sooner or later, they're going to find out you're faking it. Yeah, it's rough. It's like walking around with a mask, terrified that at any moment someone's going to rip it off and see the real you, and you're convinced that real you just isn't up to the task. Buddhism has a lot to say about this. The root of imposter syndrome? Attachment again, but this time it's attachment to identity. We build these mental images of who we think we should be, this perfect, flawless version of ourselves that never makes a mistake. And when we don't match up to that ideal, bam, imposter syndrome kicks in. But here's the kicker. The Buddha teaches that the self, this identity we cling to, is an illusion. It's like grasping at water. The harder you try to hold on, the more it slips through your fingers. We're constantly chasing perfection, aren't we? It's like we've been conditioned to believe that if we're not 100% perfect, we're failing. But perfection, it's an impossible standard. It's impermanent. There's that word again. Perfection changes from one moment to the next, and chasing it just leads to suffering. In Buddhism, we're taught to embrace the present moment, flaws and all. The lotus flower blooms from the mud, not from a pristine, flawless pond. It's in the mess, in the imperfection, that true growth happens. Now, let's get into this spotlight effect. Ever felt like everyone's watching your every move, just waiting for you to mess up? It's like you've got this imaginary spotlight shining on you, and every little slip-up is magnified, right? Well, newsflash, most people aren't paying as much attention as we think. It's the ego again, trying to convince you that you're at the center of everyone's world. In reality, People are caught up in their own stories, their own insecurities. It's like we're all walking around in our own little bubbles, worrying about ourselves. And that's where perfectionism traps us. It's this constant cycle of, I need to be perfect so no one judges me, but if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. It's exhausting. But here's where Buddhist philosophy can really help. The Buddha teaches acceptance, not of some idealized version of yourself, but of who you are right now, in this moment. Imperfect, messy, human. And that's okay. Imposter syndrome thrives in isolation. When we feel like we're the only ones struggling, it feeds on our doubt. But here's the thing. Everyone, and I mean everyone, deals with this at some point. Even the Buddha faced doubts under the Bodhi tree, questioning whether he could reach enlightenment. Doubt is part of the human experience, but the key is not to let it control you. Instead of fighting it, acknowledge it. There's that doubt again. Recognize it for what it is, just another fleeting thought, not a reflection of your true self. So how do we break free? The first step is compassion. Be kind to yourself. When that voice of imposter syndrome creeps in, ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? Of course not. You'd probably reassure them, remind them of their worth, tell them that nobody's perfect and that they're doing just fine. So why not offer yourself the same kindness? Buddhism encourages us to practice mindfulness, to be aware of our thoughts without becoming attached to them. When the voice of perfectionism or imposter syndrome shows up, don't push it away or let it take over. Just notice it, observe it, and remember, it's not who you are. It's just a passing cloud in the vast sky of your mind. Perfection is not the goal, authenticity is. And in your authenticity, you'll find your power. When you let go of the need to be perfect, you create space for growth, for learning, and for self-compassion. That's where the real transformation happens. So the next time you feel like an imposter, take a breath, smile, and remind yourself, even the lotus grows in the mud. Chapter 3, Social Comparison and Cheap Dopamine. Let's dive into something that's become almost second nature in today's world: social comparison. You ever find yourself scrolling through social media, looking at other people's lives and thinking, man, I'm so far behind, or why don't I have what they have? It's like a trap, right? And the worst part is, you know it's not real. You know people only post their highlight reels, but still, it gets to you. In Buddhism, there's this idea of tanha, which translates to craving or desire. And let's be real, social media is basically an endless cycle of craving. You see someone's new car, their perfect relationship, or their latest achievement, and suddenly you want what they have. But the Buddha taught that craving is one of the roots of suffering. The more we crave what others have, the more dissatisfied we become with our own lives. It's like chasing a mirage. No matter how fast you run, you never quite reach it. Now here's where it gets even trickier. Dopamine. Yeah, that little chemical in our brain that gives us a hit of pleasure every time we get a like, a follow, or even some juicy gossip. It feels good, right? But that kind of dopamine, it's cheap. It's like fast food for the mind. It gives you a quick buzz, but then leaves you empty, craving more. And the more you chase after it, the more you need to feel satisfied. It's a vicious cycle. The Buddha talked about this too, this constant search for pleasure, for validation, for that next high. And just like with food, too much of the wrong kind of dopamine throws us off balance. When we get stuck in this cycle of cheap dopamine, whether it's through social media, gossip, or quick pleasures, we lose sight of what truly brings happiness. We start chasing things that, in the long run, don't serve us. Think about how much time we spend comparing ourselves to others online. It's a habit, right? A mindless scroll that leaves us feeling anxious, insecure, and unfulfilled. Buddhism teaches us to be mindful of our actions and their impact on our mental state. When we start comparing ourselves, we're no longer living in the present. We're stuck in this fantasy of what we think life should be, instead of accepting life as it is. Here's the thing. Social media isn't the problem. It's our attachment to it that causes suffering. We get hooked on the idea that if we just had what that person has or looked the way they do, we'd be happy. But the truth is, happiness doesn't come from the external world. It comes from within. The Buddha taught that everything we need for peace, contentment, and joy is already inside us. It's just that we get distracted by all the noise around us. And man, does social media love to distract. Every like, every share, every comment pulls us further away from our inner peace. It feeds that part of us that wants to feel seen, validated, enough. But here's the kicker. Enough is a moving target. You'll never reach it by comparing yourself to others or chasing after dopamine hits. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. So how do we break the cycle? How do we stop the endless comparison and the chase for cheap dopamine? Buddhism gives us a powerful tool, mindfulness. By being present, by paying attention to our thoughts and actions, we can start to recognize when we're slipping into comparison mode. And when we notice it, we can choose to let it go. Another antidote? Gratitude. Instead of focusing on what others have, we can turn our attention to what we already have. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of contentment, finding joy in the simple, everyday moments. When we stop looking outward for validation and start appreciating the small things, like a deep breath, a quiet moment, or a kind gesture, we realize that we already have more than enough. Social comparison is a thief of joy, but it only has power if we let it. The more we practice mindfulness, the more we can see through the illusion of social media, and the less we'll be swayed by the highlight reels of others. Remember, what you see online is just a snapshot, a single moment in someone else's life. It doesn't define your worth, and it doesn't change who you are. Cheap dopamine will always be tempting. It's easy, it's fast, and it feels good in the moment. But the Buddha teaches us to seek deeper fulfillment, the kind that comes from within. Real happiness isn't found in likes or follows. It's found in peace, in contentment, in accepting who you are and where you are without needing to compare yourself to anyone else. Chapter 4, the power of purpose. You ever wake up feeling like you're just going through the motions? Like life's on autopilot and you're not really sure why you're doing what you're doing? That's where purpose comes in, man. Without it, everything just feels kind of hollow. You're busy but not fulfilled. Achieving things but not satisfied. It's like something's always missing, right? Buddhism gives us a lot of insight into this. The Buddha taught that having a clear sense of purpose, knowing your dharma, can change everything. And when I say purpose, I'm not talking about some grand flashy thing like being famous or rich. No, it's deeper than that. It's that feeling that what you're doing matters, that it's aligned with who you are and how you want to live. It's about contributing to something bigger than just yourself. There's this concept from Japan that ties in beautifully with Buddhist philosophy. It's called ikigai, which means reason for being. It's the sweet spot where your passions, skills, and the needs of the world all intersect. It's about finding that thing that gets you up in the morning, that gives your life meaning beyond the daily grind. Think about Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the horrors of a concentration camp. He wrote about how purpose was the key to survival for so many people in those camps. It wasn't just about staying alive, it was about having a reason to live. Frankl said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And that's so in line with Buddhist teachings. When you have a purpose, the challenges, the suffering, they don't defeat you, they fuel you. Purpose turns obstacles into stepping stones. Now let's get real. A lot of us are out here chasing things. Money, status, validation, thinking that once we get that, we'll feel fulfilled. But Buddhism teaches that this kind of pursuit is endless. It's like chasing a mirage. You get close, but never quite reach it. And even if you do, the satisfaction fades pretty quickly, right? That's because true purpose isn't found in external things. It comes from within. The Buddha encouraged us to live mindfully and with intention. That means aligning our actions with our deeper values and understanding that the purpose of life isn't to chase after fleeting pleasures, but to grow, to help others, and to develop wisdom and compassion. This is where purpose becomes a game changer. Purpose doesn't have to be some huge world-changing mission. It can be as simple as being kind to others, creating something meaningful, or learning to live more mindfully. Your purpose could be about nurturing your family, like contributing to your community, or just being a compassionate person in a world that desperately needs more of that. Buddhism teaches that even small, mindful actions can have profound ripple effects. But here's the thing, purpose isn't always easy. It doesn't mean life suddenly gets smooth and stress-free. In fact, following your purpose often means facing challenges head-on. But But with a sense of purpose, those challenges become meaningful. It's like climbing a mountain. Yeah, it's tough, but the view from the top, totally worth it. Now, when we're talking purpose, it's important to understand impermanence, a core concept in Buddhism. Everything is always changing, including your sense of purpose. It might evolve as you grow, and that's okay. The key is to stay open, to keep searching within, and to be honest with yourself about what really matters to you. We can get caught up in what society tells us our purpose should be. You know the drill. Get a good job, make money, build a reputation. But if those things aren't aligned with your true self, you'll end up feeling empty. The Buddha's teachings remind us to look beyond the superficial and ask ourselves, what do I truly value? What lights me up inside? It's not about what the world wants from you, but what you're here to give to the world. There's a beautiful quote in Buddhist philosophy: your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart, give yourself to it. And that's it. That's the essence of purpose. It's not just about finding something to do. It's about finding something worth dedicating your heart to. So, how do you find your purpose? Start by getting quiet. Meditate, reflect, and listen to that inner voice that's always guiding you, even if it's sometimes hard to hear over all the noise. Ask yourself, what brings me peace? What makes me feel alive? And don't be afraid to let go of things that no longer serve you. Sometimes finding your purpose means shedding old layers, old expectations, old goals that were never really yours to begin with. Living with purpose is like planting seeds. You might not see the fruits immediately, but with patience and care, those seeds grow into something beautiful. It's a process, and it's not about rushing or comparing your journey to someone else's. It's about trusting that, step by step, you're walking the path that's meant for you. Remember, purpose isn't about perfection or always having it all figured out. It's about direction. It's about waking up every day and choosing to live with intention, to do the things that make your heart feel full, and to contribute in a way that feels true to you. And when you live like that, everything changes. The struggles don't go away, but they don't weigh you down as much because you know you're moving towards something bigger than yourself. In the end, purpose is what transforms life from just existing to truly living. And that, my friend, is where you'll find peace. The kind of peace the Buddha spoke about, a peace that comes from within, unshaken by the chaos of the world. Chapter 6, The Problem with Instant Gratification. Let's be real for a sec. We live in a world of now. Everything is immediate. You want food, tap a screen, and it's at your door. Bored, scroll through social media, and boom, you've got 1,000 distractions. Need validation? Post a selfie and the likes roll in. But here's the thing, all that instant gratification, it's like eating candy for dinner. It feels good in the moment, but leaves you feeling kind of hollow afterward. Buddhism teaches us a lot about suffering, and one of the core causes of suffering is tanha, which is craving. And man, does instant gratification fuel that craving. Whether it's the dopamine hit from checking your phone or the rush of excitement when you buy something new, we're constantly chasing that next fix. But the Buddha warned us that this chase never ends. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. Here's the problem with all those quick hits of pleasure. They trick your brain. Every time you reach for that easy reward, you're reinforcing this loop of crave, satisfy, repeat. And yeah, it feels good in the moment, but what happens after? That high fades fast and you're left searching for the next hit. It's the same with things like gossip, binge watching, or doom scrolling. These things give us a little rush, a sense of immediate satisfaction, but they don't actually nourish us. In Buddhism, this is where the concept of dukkha comes in. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it's more than just pain. It's that deep, underlying sense of dissatisfaction we all feel when we rely on external things for happiness. We think, if I just get this thing, I'll be happy. But as soon as we get it, the feeling wears off and we're back at square one. Let's talk about dopamine. It's that feel-good chemical in your brain that lights up when you experience pleasure. But here's the catch. The more you indulge in quick, easy pleasures, the more your brain starts to rely on them. It's like you're training yourself to need more and more just to feel okay. And the result? You end up feeling restless, anxious, and never quite satisfied. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying life's little pleasures. Buddhism isn't about denying yourself joy. But the key is to not cling to these fleeting pleasures as your source of happiness. The Buddha taught that true contentment comes from within, from learning to be at peace with what is, not from constantly chasing what could be. Instant gratification is like a sugar rush for your soul. It gives you a quick burst of pleasure, but it doesn't last. And when it fades, you're left craving more. Whether it's junk food, social media likes, or Netflix marathons, these things give you that quick high, but they don't lead to lasting fulfillment. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches. Buddhism encourages us to cultivate patience and to be mindful of the difference between pleasure and contentment. Pleasure is temporary. It's that quick dopamine hit. But contentment, that's deeper. It's that steady, grounded feeling that comes from living in alignment with your values, from knowing that you don't need to chase after external things to feel whole. Think about meditation. When you first sit down, your mind is all over the place. You want to check your phone, scratch an itch, do literally anything, but sit still. Your brain craves stimulation, but the longer you sit, the more those cravings fade. You begin to realize that stillness, though uncomfortable at first, brings a deeper sense of peace than any quick distraction ever could. It's the same with life. The more we learn to resist the pull of instant gratification, the more we discover the richness of the present moment. It's like trading fast food for a home-cooked meal, yeah. It takes more time and effort, but the nourishment you get is so much more satisfying. But why is it so hard to break free from the cycle of instant gratification? Because our modern world is designed to keep us hooked. We're bombarded with ads, notifications, and endless entertainment, all designed to keep us chasing that next hit. It's easy to get stuck in the loop, always wanting more, but never feeling truly fulfilled. Buddhism offers a way out of this cycle: mindfulness. By being fully present, we start to see these cravings for what they really are: temporary, fleeting, and often not as important as they seem in the moment. When you're mindful, you can pause before reaching for that next quick fix and ask yourself, is this really going to make me happy, or am I just avoiding something deeper? Another powerful Buddhist teaching is renunciation, but don't get it twisted. It's not about giving up everything fun or enjoyable. It's about letting go of what doesn't serve you. It's about recognizing when something is just a distraction, pulling you away from real peace and happiness. It's like realizing you don't need to constantly snack when what you really need is a full, nourishing meal. We can practice this in small ways. Maybe it's putting your phone down for an hour and just being present with your thoughts. Maybe it's taking a walk without headphones, or spending time with a friend without checking your notifications. These small acts of mindfulness help break the cycle of instant gratification and bring us back to the present where true contentment lives. Here's the thing: real happiness doesn't come from a constant stream of quick fixes. It comes from slowing down, from appreciating the quiet moments, and from realizing that you're already enough as you are. The more we let go of our need for instant gratification, the more space we create for lasting joy and peace. So next time you feel that urge to grab a quick hit of pleasure, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, is this what I really need right now? Chances are, what you need is something deeper, something more meaningful. And that's not something you can get from a screen or a like button. The Buddha's teachings remind us that life's greatest rewards don't come from chasing after every fleeting desire. They come from within, from cultivating a mind that's still, peaceful, and content. So slow down, be present, and trust that true happiness doesn't need to be chased. It's already here, waiting for you to notice. Chapter 7, the importance of solitude and self-sufficiency. Let's talk about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable: solitude. In a world that's constantly connected, where we're just a text, a notification, or a call away from someone, being alone can feel weird, right? Almost like there's something wrong if you're not constantly surrounded by people or distractions. But here's the thing: solitude, it's powerful. It's where a lot of deep growth happens, even though we often avoid it like the plague. Buddhism teaches us that all of our attachments, including the ones we have to other people, can lead to suffering. And it's not to say relationships are bad, far from it. Relationships can be beautiful and essential for our human experience. But when we become dependent on others for our happiness, our self-worth, or even our sense of identity, we start to lose touch with our true selves. You ever notice how people sometimes fill their lives with noise, constant social plans, endless scrolling, or back-to-back activities, just to avoid being alone? That's because solitude forces us to face ourselves. No distractions, no outside validation, just you and your thoughts. And let's be honest, that can be uncomfortable. But in Buddhism, this is where the real work happens. The Buddha emphasized the importance of inner reflection and getting to know your mind. And guess what? You can't do that when you're always distracted by the world around you. When we talk about solitude in Buddhism, we're not talking about isolation or cutting yourself off from the world. We're talking about mindful solitude, where you intentionally spend time alone to reconnect with yourself. It's in these quiet moments that you can reflect on who you are without all the external noise. It's about developing a relationship with yourself that's independent of what others think or expect from you. Here's the thing. We're often afraid of being alone because we equate solitude with loneliness. But solitude and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness is a feeling of lack. It's the craving for connection, the feeling that something's missing. Solitude, on the other hand, is wholeness. It's about being content with your own company, about finding peace in yourself without needing someone else to fill that space. In Buddhism, there's a deep respect for self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean being closed off or emotionally distant from others. It means being whole within yourself, so that your happiness and peace aren't dependent on external factors. When you're self-sufficient, you're like a strong tree, rooted deeply in the earth. Storms may come, people may come and go, but you stand firm because you're grounded in your own inner stability. Think about it. How often do we seek validation from others? How often do we feel the need to be seen, heard, or appreciated just to feel okay? Buddhism teaches us that this is another form of attachment, an attachment to other people's opinions, praise, or even just their presence. And while it's natural to want connection, it becomes problematic when our sense of self-worth is tied to it. When you embrace solitude, you start to break free from this need. You realize that your worth isn't determined by how many people are around you or how often you're invited out. Your worth comes from within, from the simple fact that you are. Solitude helps you cultivate this inner strength, this sense of self that's not swayed by the opinions or actions of others. But let's not sugarcoat it. Solitude can be challenging at first. When you're alone, all the thoughts you've been avoiding tend to surface. The doubts, the fears, the insecurities, they all come out to play. But here's the thing. Facing those thoughts is part of the journey. The Buddha often taught that suffering arises when we run away from our pain. But when we sit with it, when we face it head on, we begin to understand it. We see that these thoughts are just that, thoughts. They come and go, just like clouds in the sky. They don't define us. Spending time alone allows you to observe these thoughts without judgment. It's like meditation. At first, your mind is racing, trying to distract you with a million different things. But the longer you sit, the quieter it gets. Solitude works the same way. Over time, the fear of being alone starts to fade and you begin to find peace in the stillness. Another beautiful teaching in Buddhism is that everything we need is already within us. We spend so much time searching outside ourselves for happiness, love, validation, when in reality all of that is already inside. Solitude gives you the space to realize this. It helps you discover that you don't need to constantly seek out others to feel whole. You are whole. Now, does this mean you should live like a hermit and never interact with anyone? Of course not. Relationships are an important part of life, but the healthiest relationships come from a place of self-sufficiency, where you're not depending on the other person to complete you, but instead sharing your wholeness with them. It's like two trees standing side by side, each rooted in their own strength, yet able to share the sunlight and grow together. When you develop a strong sense of self through solitude, you actually show up better in your relationships. You're not constantly seeking approval or validation. You're able to give without expecting anything in return, and that creates deeper, more authentic connections. So how do you start embracing solitude? Start small. Maybe it's turning off your phone for an hour and just sitting with your thoughts. Maybe it's taking a walk alone without music or distractions, just observing the world around you. Or maybe it's setting aside time each day to meditate or journal, to get to know yourself on a deeper level. The more time you spend in solitude, the more you'll begin to trust yourself. You'll realize that you're not as dependent on others as you once thought. And with that comes a beautiful freedom. A freedom to be yourself, to live authentically, without constantly worrying about how others perceive you. Solitude isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. It's in those quiet moments that you find your true self, your inner strength, and your deep connection to the present moment. When you stop running from solitude and start seeing it as a space for growth and self-discovery, that's when everything changes. That's when you become truly free. Chapter 8, Life as a Game of Small Wins. Let's talk about how we approach life. A lot of us tend to see life as this huge, overwhelming thing, filled with massive goals and dreams that feel almost impossible to reach. We're constantly thinking about the big picture, right? When I get that job, I'll be happy. Or once I hit that big milestone, everything will fall into place. But here's the thing. Life isn't really about those huge mountaintop moments. Life is made up of all the small wins along the way, the little victories we often overlook. Buddhism teaches us to focus on the present moment, to be fully aware of what's happening right now. And when you're always looking to the future, chasing after some massive goal, you miss out on the beauty of those small, everyday wins. It's those tiny steps that get you where you want to go, not some giant leap. There's a concept in Japanese philosophy called kaizen, which is all about continuous improvement through small, incremental changes. It's the idea that instead of trying to make huge, overwhelming changes all at once, you focus on little improvements, one step at a time. And this ties beautifully into the Buddhist practice of mindfulness, being present for each moment and seeing progress not as something that happens all at once, but as something you build over time. Think of life as a game. Each day is a new level, and the goal isn't to win the entire game in one go. It's to collect small wins, little by little. Maybe today, your win is getting up early and meditating for 5 minutes. Maybe it's eating a healthy meal, or spending time with someone you care about, or just showing kindness to yourself. Each small win adds up, and over time you start to see that those little victories are what create real change. In Buddhism, we learn that impermanence is one of the core truths of life. Everything is always changing, and that includes our goals, our challenges, and our progress. One day you might feel like you're crushing it, making all the right moves, and the next day, maybe things fall apart, and it feels like you're back at square one. But the key is to keep going, to focus on those small, sustainable steps, even when things feel hard. There's a lot of wisdom in the idea that success doesn't come from one huge breakthrough, but from consistent effort. It's like planting a garden. You don't wake up the day after planting seeds and expect a full bloom. You water it a little every day, give it sunlight, tend to it with care, and over time, those small efforts turn into something beautiful. Here's where it gets tricky though. Our minds love the idea of instant gratification. We want to see results now. But Buddhism reminds us to let go of attachment to outcomes. It's not about the end result, but about being fully present in the process. That's where the magic happens. When you stop obsessing over the finish line and start enjoying the small steps along the way, life feels lighter, more joyful. One of the biggest challenges we face is this idea that unless we achieve something massive, it doesn't count. But think about it. Does hitting a big goal actually make you happier? Or is it the feeling of making progress day by day that gives you that sense of fulfillment? Buddhism teaches that the path itself is the destination. It's the journey, the daily practice, the small wins that create a meaningful life, not the end result. Let's take this idea of small wins into our relationships. A lot of times we think we need to do something grand to show we care, buying expensive gifts, making huge sacrifices, but really, it's the small things that matter most. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, being fully present with someone when they're speaking. These small acts of love and kindness are the real game changers. And over time, they build the foundation for strong, meaningful connections. The same goes for personal growth. If you're trying to build a new habit or make a change in your life, the secret isn't to overhaul everything at once. It's to start small. Want to meditate every day? Start with just 5 minutes. Want to improve your health? Focus on making one healthy choice each day. Those little wins might seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they create momentum. And that momentum, that's what carries you forward. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, "A jug fills drop by drop." It's a reminder that no effort is wasted, that every small action contributes to the whole. Even when it feels like you're not making progress, trust that those drops are filling the jug. It's just that sometimes progress is invisible at first, but with patience and persistence, it adds up. And here's the best part. When you start focusing on small wins, you build confidence. Every time you achieve a little goal, you prove to yourself that you're capable. You start to trust in your ability to grow, to improve, and to handle whatever life throws your way. And that confidence, it's like fuel for your journey. It keeps you going, even when the road gets tough. So how do we start embracing life as a game of small wins? It's simple. Break down your big goals into tiny, manageable steps. Don't get overwhelmed by the big picture. Focus on what you can do today. Celebrate each small win, no matter how small it might seem. Got out of bed early? Win. Ate a healthy breakfast? Win. Took 5 minutes to breathe and center yourself? Major win. Each of these moments adds up, creating a life filled with intention and progress. Buddhism teaches us to find joy in the present moment, to let go of the need for constant achievement, and to be patient with ourselves as we grow. Life isn't a race to some far-off destination. It's a journey of small, mindful steps. And the more we focus on those small wins, the more we realize that they are the big wins. Because in the end, it's the small things, the daily practices, the little moments of kindness, the steady progress that create a life of meaning and fulfillment. So start where you are. Focus on today. Celebrate your small wins, because each step you take, no matter how small, is part of the greater journey. And that journey, that's where you'll find peace, joy, and true success.